I'm Albert Vernon Sigars, S-I-G-A-R-S, rhymes with tigers. And I'll be 96 years old if I live that long, till December 6, 1996. I was born December 6, 1900 here in Joplin.
Okay. Now, we're in Joplin right now in your apartment.
Yes, and I have been here about 2 years in this apartment. My wife died 6 years ago, and with the idea that I needed to be where I could get emergency treatment if anything did happen, I got here, and this has been very, very fine.
Where were you born?
I was born in what we call Easttown, Joplin, Missouri, on a corner of what was then known as Finnan Mineral, and now is Poolin Mineral. You go about 2 miles toward north and east of here, where I was born. At the time I was born, my grandfather rather, was a fire chief of the fire department of Joplin when they had used horses. They were still using the horses.
Huh. Do you have any pictures of that?
Sir?
Do you have any pictures of the old fire?
Well, yes, I probably do.
You might look for those later.
I'd have to hunt for them, but I probably do.
Okay. And what was your father's name? See, what was your father's name?
My daughter is Mary Catherine Jones at this time. Had one daughter. She had 5. They had 10, and I now have 5 great-great-grandsons and 1 great-great-granddaughter. I think it was pretty good for starting with 1.
What was your father's name? Oh,
My father's name was Albert Vernon Sigars. My mother's maiden name was Myrtle Lillian Jones. I'm just a stop between the Joneses. My daughter is now Jones.
Let's see. Take a few more pictures of you here.
That's all right.
It takes quite a few to get one good one. Did you grow up here in Joplin?
Did I grow up here? Yes, until I went to St. Louis in 1916 to work in a plant up there that was making war materials and one thing and another.
Oh, you did?
And then I went back to, I left Joplin in my second year in the high school here, volunteered for the Navy at that time. Well, I volunteered, went to St. Louis first, and then volunteered in the Navy in St. Louis. And then I had to make up my final high school credits and one thing and another. I went to night school in St. Louis. For 5 years I went to night school, made up my credits and all, and then also took 2 years of law while I was at it. But our daughter was born at that time, and I thought I had too much expense to continue any further along. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about this defense plant. Tell me about this plant that you worked at in St. Louis.
Well, it was they were manufacturing. What I was doing was running the steel lathe, cutting hubs for cannon wheels. Huh. And I worked there for a matter of 6-7 months. I guess at 16 years of age. I'd been making about $4 or $5 a week down here, and I was making $4 a day up there, of course, so, which was big money in those days for me.
What was the name of the plant?
I can't remember, but it was on Plymouth Avenue, but I swear I can't remember the name of the plant. I don't think I remember that at all. It was 6400 Plymouth Avenue in St. Louis, as I remember. Not all my memories correct, or something might be wrong.
Were you supposed to be older than that to work in the plant, or did that?
Well, no, they were so hard up for laborers at that time. They was taking everybody that was practically able to go to the service, of course, and they were so hard up for laborers that there wasn't much question about it. If you could do it, you got the job, that's all. And I held my own with the others for a while.
And how long did you work at that plant?
Oh, probably 6 or 7 months. I don't know exactly something.
Were these cannon being used by the U.S.? The cannon that you produced there, the wheels?
Well, of course, I never saw it naturally. All I did was make, they made steel hubs for cannon wheels, and I was allotted so much, worked on a piece proposition. In other words, I got paid a certain amount of money no matter what happened, but then after that I earned more money if I produced more hubs.
Do you know?
And the reason I left that plant, by the way, there was a man maybe 45, 50 years of age, and they was paying him more money than it was me, and I quit. In other words, whatever it was, we had a certain amount of hubs that we had to finish for a day's work. And then after that, we got paid a percentage on above that, and he was. They cut his amount that he had, number that he had to make down below. He had to make a lot less than I did for a day's work to start with, and that didn't suit me well, so I quit.
Do you remember when the United States got involved in World War I that day?
Well, they got involved in 1914, of course, but they actually, the Expeditionary Force, I think, took effect in 1917, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And of course, I had nothing to do with the Expeditionary Force because mine was naval. What happened there was, I went up on Grand Avenue one night to a motion picture show with my mother, and the tank corps were just coming into being at that time, and they had a recruiting station right just 2 doors away from the theater, and were recruiting for tank corps personnel. And when we left the theater, I bounced into that tank corps place and was going to enlist, and my mother got a hold of my coattail and pulled me back out. She said, no, you're not going to do that. She said, I'll get my consent to going to the Navy, but not to the tank corps. So that ended my tank corps experience. And but they were just then. And the rumor was that you could go into the tank corps, and in 6 weeks they'd have you in battle. And of course, all people who were very patriotic in those days, especially us youngsters, you know, we were anxious to get into battle, which was a good thing we didn't, of course, but we were anxious to do it. That was we had that finger pointing at us, we need you, you know. But I went to the Navy, and well, as I told you, I joined the Naval Reserve, and immediately they sent me to Great Lakes Training Station in North Chicago, up on the Great Lakes there, on Lake Michigan. And I spent the armistice was signed before I got away from there. What happened is, I think, and I'm just barely making this supposition, I say I was only 17 years old. I only weighed 115 pounds, by the way. And I think they figured, well, the best thing to do with me was hide me off somewhere into a place where I could be of some value anyway, without, because I wasn't big enough or strong enough to be of much value otherwise. So they made an instructor out of me in the signal school at Great Lakes. And I spent 5 months of my 7 months was spent as an instructor in the signal school. I became a second-class signalman, and while I was doing that, of course, that was my final advancement. And I was discharged in about, I think it was about January of, let's see, January 1919. I was discharged, honorably discharged, of course, you know. But one of the things I remember most about the flu epidemic hit at that time while I was there. And when they put 17 of us on stretcher detail, that run 8 stretchers, of course, and an extra man for fill-in. And we started at the morgue. That for some reason or other, the flu epidemic, they always just hit the younger people a lot worse than it did later. And they were dying like everything up there at the station. And they detailed, as I say, eight stretchers to carry dead bodies from the morgue to be shipped out. I remember very well that the railroad had yellow kind of passenger cars, but they weren't passenger cars, they were freight cars. And when we started at the morgue, which was about, I'd say, a half a block away from where the cars were anchored, or cars were stopped, and we started with they had a certain number of people in the morgue. I don't remember the number now, but anyway, we worked from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and when we quit 5 o'clock, or when we were let loose at 5 o'clock, they had more people in the morgue than what we started with. We kept up a continual traveling back and forth. They were dying that fast up there in Great Lakes at that time. And I had several friends back in Jop that should be young fellows that died during that time.
But you never did get it?
Sure.
Did you ever get the flu?
I never have had the flu, no. And I don't take flu vaccine or whatever you call it either. I never have. I don't know why, but as I told you a while ago, I think I'm the luckiest man this side of heaven. But I never did get flu. And the doctors, my wife was an RN, and practically every year she got a flu shot. I mean, after they had that flu shot deal. And she always had a touch of the flu in spite of everything. And I never would take a flu shot, and I never had a touch of the flu. Never did. I had a time or 2 years ago when they used to call it the grip. I had a little touch of that, but it was really just a slight flu deal, I guess. But at any rate, but I've been lucky.
When did you have that?
When I had the grip? Oh, probably when I was about 15, something like that, 12, 14, or 15, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
I worked all my life. My mother and father separated when I was 14, and we became her. Went with my mother, and there's 4 of us boys, and I'm the oldest, and I spent my time making a little dab of money here and there so we keep expenses paid, because there was no such thing as making your estranged husband pay for your caper in those days. This didn't exist. Yeah. And my father, when the divorce took place, just completely wiped his hands of us. So my mother raised the 4 of us boys as a widow. She was a widow. And today I wonder how in the world she ever did it, with washing overalls and wringing by hand and all that kind of stuff, But the first job I ever had, there was a pickle factory over in East Town here, what they call a pickle factory. I went up there and applied for a job in the school vacation time, and they gave me about a 2/3 size water bucket with a lid on top of it and a dipper down inside of it, and filled it up with horseradish, fresh ground horseradish, and told me to get out and sell it on the streets, or to house, which I did. And of course, it was easy to do, because the minute you opened it up and struck under their nose, they either was glad to get rid of you or something. But anyway, I made a little, I don't know, maybe $3 or $4, $5 a week out of it, and it helped out on the family money. But that's the first job that I remember having. And I've sold everything since that, except, I never sold vacuum cleaners, but I sold a lot of different things, house to house. When the electric washing machines first came into existence, I applied for a job. I don't remember now what I had been doing, something. I spent 3 different times I worked for a Prudential Insurance Company. When I was 21 years, and and 1 month and 2 months old, I went to work for the Prudential Insurance Company. Their office at that time was in the Frisco building, which is up here and been vacant now for 10 years maybe. But I had 2 territories. One of them was Carl Junction, Missouri, which you may not know about over here. But Carl Junction, Missouri, I worked over there 1 week, and the next week I was here in Joplin. I had the red light district in Joplin. That's part of it. I'm living in it now. What used to be the red light district.
Oh.
The city hall and all. At the time I went to work, it was down at 2nd and Joplin Street, and now it's over here east, and it was a block west of here at that time. That was where the jail was and the city hall and everything. And right just outside of it was, as I say, the red light district.
We're on Virginia Street right now, right?
On Virginia, and that's 1 block east of Main. And there used to be 1 block west of Main. On 2nd Street was the city hall and all. Jail and so forth and so on.
And let's see, do you remember the sale of Liberty bonds?
Oh yes, by the way, when I went in World War II, I went to Alaska, spent 18 months in Alaska, and I got a call from the commanding officer of the Northwest Service Command in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. That's where their offices was, the Northwest Service. And he asked me to come down there, which I did. And when I got there, he appointed me to tour Alaska, selling war bonds to civilian workers that were on duty up there building airports. And he sent a captain along with him, by the way, to do the paperwork. All I had to do to get in and make a talk. And then the captain took over. I know 2 reasons for that. One of them was I didn't have any business handling the money and all, so he did handle it. But at any rate, we toured Alaska by plane and also by boat. And I never happened to, I did take 1 ride in a dog sled, but that's the only one. But I flew, by the way, I don't mean I flew, I was a passenger in a plane that flew over a place where, what's his name down in Oklahoma? What's his?
Oh, Will Rogers? Will Rogers?
Will Rogers, yeah, and the man went down up there, you know. I could see, I never was down close to it, but I could see the place, the marker they put there where they went down up in Alaska. And I suppose I was successful because I'd never got any reports otherwise, but of course, as I say, the captain. By the way, I had a very unusual experience another time too. I was coming back from Ohio, actually a visit to a brother of mine who, by the way, is a World War II man and 93 years old, and he was here last week, all week with me. But at any rate, I was coming back by plane, had changed planes at St. Louis. And when I got off the plane, I went out, had to walk out to the next plane that I had to get to, and I had a suitcase. And somebody came when I was checking my tickets. Man, somebody hit me on the shoulder and said, "I've been looking for somebody important to see." Well, I turned around and looked, and I said, "Where you been?" He said, "Well, I've been in Washington, D.C." He said, "I'm a brigadier general this time." And I said, "Well, you've seen enough important people." He said, not important Joplin people. And he was a brigadier, he is a retired brigadier general. And when it come time for the leave on the smaller plane, he grabbed my suitcase and carried it out to the plane for me. I said, "Well, I had a captain that took care of me up in Alaska, but I never thought I'd have a brigadier general carrying my baggage." But he is now a pastor at Bethany Presbyterian Church out here. He's a brigadier general in the chaplain's corps.
Oh, yeah.
Chaplain's corps. He was a chaplain and when he got his promotion to brigadier general.
What's his name?
Watson, let's see, Orrin Watson.
Ah.
Orrin Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. And when we got into Joplin, he said, "Now I want you to wait a little minute here." He bought it. He said, "I got a 13-year-old daughter. I want to meet you." He went outside somewhere and got her and brought her in. told her what a wonderful man I was. But anyway, at any rate, he's been, and I've spoken, let's say, I think maybe 3 times. I know I have twice at Memorial Day appearances at his, or I mean Veterans Day appearances at his church out here. I understand now he's had an operation for a heart condition, so not in good shape. But a brigadier general carried my baggages. And by the way, in 1940, I was the Democratic nominee for Congress in this district.
Oh, you were.
And Harry Truman was running for his 2nd term as United States Senator. So I became very well acquainted. In fact, I introduced him on a number of occasions. He introduced me on a number. We campaigned together down here. So we became first-name friends, as you might say, Harry Truman. I remember very well, I was sitting in my office one day, and the telephone rang, and I had some male voice said, "Judge?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to go up to Everton, Missouri, and make a talk for me." And I said, "Well, who is this, please?" He said, "This is Harry." I said, "Harry who?" He said, "Harry Truman." I felt like 2 cents. See, I said, "Oh, Senator, I'm so sorry that I didn't recognize your voice, but I sure didn't." But anyway, I made the talk for him, by the way. He was still senator at that time. Later on, I was in Alaska when he became president. And I knew him so well that I said, "Oh my God, oh Lord, Lord." You know, it's like like your brother or uncle or somebody happens to get in a place like that, you say, "Oh Lord, Lord, Lord," see. But we were very, very good friends, and I never once. I was in Washington D.C. twice after that. Once while he was president, but I never even. I did try to call him, but I never got anywhere with it. And I was in Independence, Missouri, the night his mother died, and my wife and I were there in a hotel, and I did try to call him then, but I couldn't get him on the phone. And I went down to his home, where his home was, and they had so many Secret Service people on duty everywhere. I just quit it and went on. I just didn't even go back to him. But we were very personal friends. I also happen to be Catholic, and I have a personal acquaintance with 2 of the cardinals now. That one of them's in Rome, and the other is Archbishop of Boston. And so I feel very, very lucky, as I say.
Tell me some more Truman stories.
Well, we were in a little town down here in southwest Missouri one night, and it was a Republican stronghold.
Yeah.
And they were just giving Harry hell about the appointments from one another that might be available, you know. And he spent with them till about midnight. And then about midnight, but he took it all in good humor, in spite of the fact that they called him and everything, but a gentleman, of course, see. And we did, when the midnight come on, there was a real small, little old-fashioned hotel there, and we stayed in that. They had only one room left, and I stayed all night in the same room with Harry. I didn't sleep with him. I mean, we were in separate beds, but we did have. I stayed all night with Harry Truman in that hotel. But I can't tell you the name of the town nor the name of the hotel now. I don't remember it.
Yeah. It was just making a noise here. Okay, we got it going again.
While I was back here, after he became president, there was a mining company over here, just over the edge of the Kansas line here, that in those days they had some sort of a federal program where they give allotments to various mines to go ahead and produce, so they could use it for the war effort. And they came to me one day. Well, I went to work at the post office, by the way, and came to me a fellow came to me after I'd been working there maybe about a week, I guess. He said, "You're a personal friend of Harry Truman." I said, "Oh, yes, I think so." He said, "We need $14,000, I believe it was, that we're going to even have to close our mine, or we need I think it was $14,000. And he said, we sent an attorney to Washington, D.C., and he spent about 10 days up there, but he never got anywhere with it. And he said, how about you calling Harry Truman to see if you can do something with it? I said, well, I'll make an effort, but I swear I doubt that I can do any good, but I'll make an effort. So at any rate, I tried to call him, but I couldn't get him. They wouldn't let me talk to him personally. So I sat down and wrote him a letter. And I said, I'm not saying that you should do this, but if you decide you are going to do it, or that it's the thing to do, when you return to civilian life, I'll give you a trout dinner at the hotel in Neosho, Missouri. And I got a very fine letter back from Harry Truman when he was president, signed by him and everything, telling me what he'd do that. But he never showed up any time, though I never did a chance to do it. And I let the letter get away from me, and that's simple. I should have said by all means, see, but there's a lot. I've done a lot of things in my life, and a lot of them haven't consisted of saving anything. That's But the rainbow trout was the real specialty of Neosho at that time, and I said, I'll take you to Neosho and give you a rainbow trout dinner. So, and he said he accepted that. And by the way, while I'm bragging, the Eleanor, what was his name? The president back in 1934. Eleanor Roosevelt came to Joplin, and since I happened to be in the judge's position at that time, of course I was well known and everything, so somebody designated me to go over, and I had about an hour's conference with her. And that was just before, at the beginning of World War II. And they had some recruits down here at Camp Crowder below Neosho. And on the YMCA at that time asked me to come over and teach these kids, these recruits, how to square dance. So that word got out pretty well when I was teaching them, of course. And Mrs. Roosevelt said, young man, I understand you're a square dance dancer. I said, oh yes, I love that. I'm addicted to square dancing, all right. And she said, I said, Mrs. Truman, I've understood you're a square dancer, and I've always been hoping that someday I'd have a chance to dance with you. She said, that's a date, young man. But we never got it. But I did teach her at the USO. They were holding another session in the YMCA at that time. The USO, I did spend some little time teaching square dancing to the sailors the soldiers on leave, you know.
Yeah.
USO parties. I also, in 1942, of course, I went into the Army under what they call a VOC, Volunteer Officer Candidate. That's one of these six months wonders, you know, when you get through with it. I went in there, and I forgot my subject just that quick. I was
volunteer officer candidate.
I was supposed to take 4 months of training for and then be put into the OCS, and when the 4 months of my training was up, they wanted me to either stay at Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which was where I was taking my basic, and or of course I was 42 years old at that time. All the other fellows called me Pop, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so, and I told the commanding officer, I said, no, I want out. My 4 months are up, and I want out because I'm not going to spend my time breaking a bunch of fellows I can't even control or anything else, and it calls me Pop. I just don't think that's good. He said, you'll be you'd be a captain in a year. He said, as sure as anything. And I said, well, if you were the one going to make the appointments, and if you were going to be here a year from now, I might listen to you. But otherwise, give me a discharge because I just don't want. And he said, well, we can send you to the MPs. And I said, no, I don't want the MPs either. I said, I'll take anything in the judiciary you might have, but I don't. So at any rate, I come back home, and the Northwest Service Command then went through them and went into Alaska. As I said, spent 18 months up there.
When you were in Alaska, were you still in the Army then?
No, I was sort of a double deal. I don't understand exactly. I was in civilian status, but the Army controlled me. In other words, as I told you, when he told me to come down there to Edmonton, Alberta, I had to catch a plane and go down there. And then he put me on condition of selling war bonds. So I was sort of a semi, I don't know what you'd call it. I had a position where, in case I wanted to travel anywhere, by plane, military plane or otherwise, I could bump anybody under a captain if I wanted to play, wanted a seat on a plane and it was loaded.
Get you unhooked here.
Is that the phone?
Yeah. There we go. Doing okay.
Yeah. Hello. Well, the man's here now interviewing me. And so, huh? Well, I'm trying to miss most of them. Call me later then. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going again.
You want to stick that thing back?
Oh, yeah. Good thing you remembered that.
So many wires. I don't know one from another, so.
There we go. Do you remember anything about the war bonds in World War I?
Well, I don't know. I know that there was a great effort to sell them all, of course, I know that. And even before I left Joplin, why they were trying that. I just started the war, you might say. But, and later on, of course, I became sold on them myself. And I sold a reasonable number of them to workers who, civilian workers, which was my job, was to go into a civilian mess hall, for instance, give them a song and dance about the bonds, and then, as I say, then turn them over to the captain.
But that was in World War II.
Sure.
But that was in World War II.
Yeah, it was World War II, yes.
What was it like in Missouri during World War I here?
Here in Joplin?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, Joplin was a very patriotic town, although we had a lot of Germans here, and there was a lot of feeling against Germany. And we had one place up here called a planing mill that was organized and run by a German family. And Breckel was her name, Breckel. And they were looked down upon, you know, everybody avoided them and all. Mm-hmm. At that time also the Ku Klux Klan was very, very active in Joplin. Oh. And they were down on everybody they thought they could get by with, you know. And I was invited to join them. All the downtown officials, police and everybody else, if you wasn't Ku Klux Klan, you didn't go to work. Huh. But I was elected judge in spite of that. And Harry Truman, when he was campaigning, he appeared before the Ku Klux in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And very definitely told them that he didn't believe in their methods, but still made the grade. Of course, he was under the Pendergrass deal, and he made the grade and went into Congress, you know, at this time. So, but this Joplin was a wild and woolly town in the days gone by. as I told you, the red light district covered about 7 or 8 blocks down here. But I was too young to see it at all, but I know there was 2 colored men hung just 2 blocks west here on 2nd Street. Mob hung them to a telephone pole out there. I was only about 3 or 4 years old, though, so I don't remember. I didn't take part in any way or know anything, but I did know about it. And but we had most of my judgeship was I was what they call justice of the peace, but I had the misdemeanor cases and also the preliminary hearings for felony cases. And we had a case one time when I was judge, by the way, when it was a whole lot like the Simpson case out here that run a year out in California. Yeah. And it so happened that I had the preliminary hearing on that. And of course, I bound the man. What they had was a nightclub out here on West 7th Street. And they found a girl weighed about 110 pounds or so out in the weeds there with her split wide open with a knife. And they finally wound up, they charged this man was killing her. And they'd seen him leave the nightclub with her. At any rate, I had the preliminary hearing, bound him over to circuit court. And when he come up for trial in circuit court, I was a clerk of the circuit court by that time. I had quit as a judge and went over, and the jury went out and acquitted him. He had blood in his cuffs of his pants, and proved that he went home, and first thing he did just before they arrested him was wash his shirt out one day, and he was as guilty as he could be, but they acquitted him. I don't believe in the present jury system we have, which says there must be 12 people who all agree. When the Supreme Court is made up of 9 people, and pronounce things that affects all of us, time after time, on a 5-4 decision, I think that a majority of the jury ought to make the verdict, whatever it might be. And I'm just certainly sitting here that there'd be a lot of squawk about. Of course, the defense lawyers, if they heard me say that, they'd all be against me, because I think my personal opinion is that Simpson was guilty, and I think that the racial overtones that were promoted by the defense got him off. That's what I think, and I don't think that was the case with this man here. But 6 months later, after he was acquitted in this, he died of a natural cause. And I said it was a natural cause. So I think maybe the Lord took him away because he was guilty. Maybe I'm wrong.
Hard to say. You remember anything about scrap drives in World War I?
Well, yes, but they very much in those days they didn't have much aluminum, but we all saved our cans. That we had canned food. We all saved our cans and crushed them and used them for scrap. They were turned into scrap. And of course, at that time, Joplin boomed because lead. This was a lead mining district, and we just had lead went out of sight. Of course, the price did, and we had ration books, all right too. Ration, we couldn't buy on certain things, and what we could buy was just very, very limited. In other words, you had a ration book say how much meat you could buy, how much this you could buy, and another thing. And tires for the cars was almost impossible to get a new tire, no matter what the circumstances were. I had a friend that was commander of the American Legion at Cassville, Missouri, and they put on a campaign and some kind of other raise money and give a brand new Dodge away that somebody had furnished him. And he had an old rattle-trap car with his tires almost shot, and he was in the insurance business. And he took a chance on on the new car just like everybody else did. And he won it. And he turned right around and said, no, give it another chance. And he kept on driving his old car. I never will forget that. But his idea was that he had no business winning, although he had paid for his tickets the same. But it was a Legion putting the thing on, you know. You run into a lot of good people. There's a lot of bad people, but you run into a lot of good people too.
These ration books, was that in World War I?
Huh?
This rationing, was that in World War I?
Yes, they had rationing in World War I as well as World War II also. But I think maybe that the second time around was a little more stringent than the first. I think that they were a little rougher on what they did about the second time around. But Lord, in World War I, when you made $5 a week, you were doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. I came back from the Navy in World War II, went to work 6 days a week for a factory over here, what we call Meeker Company here, $10 a week. Mm-hmm. You never dream of that these days, of course. But I don't know. They talk about the good old days. This is the good old days.
Tell me about Victory Gardens in World War I.
Huh?
You remember Victory Gardens in World War I? The Victory Gardens.
Oh yes, they had, and that's one thing I tell you. My grandfather was a gardener that thought if you had a hunk of dirt anywhere in it as big as the end of your thumb, it must be broken up. And he ruined me for ever making gardens. But I did work a few times in what they call victory gardens. They had them scattered around various parts of town, and they would induce you, kept wanting volunteers to help out with it. And I did work a few days in making gardens, which I hated worse than anything. But
was that in World War I or II?
Well, that was World War I. Both.
Both. Huh?
We might have had them. I'm not sure about World War II. I just wasn't around Joplin enough in World War II because I got left here and then went from St. Louis, of course.
Yeah. Do you remember? Were the women involved in the war effort in World War I?
The women were involved in all the wars we've ever had, of course, but they had no official position in World War I. No, they weren't part of the army or anything. They may have been a few of them that sneaked in some way or other, but they weren't actually a part of the army.
What did they do?
Well, they went with the army various places, and when the army moved, well, they moved too a lot of times, and they did do chores for various, mostly the big shots, of course, generals and so on down.
Yeah.
And the group of, there was always a group of women that followed the military around, and for the specific purpose of keeping the military satisfied, of course. There wasn't any question about that. Sexually, I'm speaking about now, of course. And we had a lot of people here from Joplin. We had a lot of whorehouses here in Joplin, and there's no question in my mind but what a lot of them later on became military companions of soldiers. That I was too young to know anything about it in the World War I, so but they just know that's been the case always. But do you know, there's one thing about it. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. And do you know that with our military, they have gone forth to foreign countries to help the Lord stamp out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. They've gone, in other words, for the underdog. They've gone to protect the underdog. We, almost without exception, that's been the case in the wars that we've been in. We've gone to help the Koreans, for instance, and we went to stop Hitler and his drive and all. and back in the Prussian Guard that the Kaiser had in World War I. That was really our first expeditionary force into Europe, was done for the purpose of helping Belgium and the other countries that were being overrun by the Prussian forces. The Kaiser. Everybody wanted to kill the Kaiser in those days. Later on, they all wanted to kill the Hitler. That's what we see. And now they want to kill Houston. And I think the only way they'll ever straighten it out is when they do get rid of him. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Did you have any other brothers in World War I?
Not in World War I. No, I was the only one that was old enough, and I had the light to get in. But I had 3 other brothers. And in World War II, my next brother next to me, as I said, was here last week, 93 years old, went into World War II into the infantry. And spent some time. I don't think he ever went overseas, but he was in the infantry here. But I always managed to dodge the gun firing, and I would have gone if I had to. Of course, I was there, and I did whatever they told me to do. But on the other hand, I used what little sense I had to try to avoid that too. So I can't, for the life of me, well, I do know too that as long as we have humans in the world, we'll still have wars, because there's no such thing as humans getting along, not even a man and wife, for instance. These days it's worse than what used to be even. They're bound to be wars as long as there's bound to be greed and desire for, extra stuff.
Yeah.
Bound to be wars. And when they tell me that, well, I think the only time that we'll ever have peace, if we do, worldwide peace, will be when the Lord comes and tramps out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. I'm a great believer in poetry. You may have noticed that. So,
yeah.
And I have a lady friend who called a little bit ago, and I told her to call me back later, who is a poet. And she has one poem that I remember very well. And by the way, I'm long past having much use for exercise as far as physical condition is concerned.
Yeah.
But I think that your brain needs exercise too. And so I try to make it an effort to memorize a new poem about every 6 weeks. I used to do it every month, but I got too lazy to do that often. And but she wrote one that I think is true. She said, "Dear Lord, when you created man and fitted him into your plan, you kept the world within your care, but made it running his affair. You thought it wise, and you must know I do not question it. And so amazed and humble now I see that I need you and you need me. You need my feet to walk for you, my hands to do the things you do. You need my mind to think and dream to carry out your eternal theme. It is so great, and I'm so small, I scarce comprehend it all, the value of such little bits and how each tiny action fits. But feet and hands and mind and heart are to me a necessary part. So great task, so much to do. Yes, dear Lord, you need me, and oh, how I need you." That was written by Letha Dangerfield, who is blind, by the way, has been ever since she was 16 years old. Sure. And one of the books over there is written by her. She's got better than 300 poems in it. But I think I'm not what you call too deeply religious, but I do think that that'll be the first time we'll ever have peace all over the world.
Yeah.
It's if and when he comes back and says, do this and do that and another.
Now, what was your uniform like in World War I?
Huh?
What was your uniform like when you were in the Navy in World War I?
Well, of course, we as a fellow had the blue on, blue uniforms, and the low deck, and a neckerchief hung down and tied way down here somewhere, and a white hat, and also the pancake hat that I showed you in that picture. But of course, everything was furnished. We bought nothing. Everything was furnished to us, and It was all right. I kind of liked the uniform. And he even managed to get me a girlfriend or two in Chicago while I was there. That's all I had, just a couple of days.
Now, what kind of training did you do exactly up there?
What's that?
When you first went in the Navy, how did they train you?
Well, I remember very well the first week I spent in the Navy. And we got up and lined up. Well, to commence with, they lined us all up naked as the Navy's born, about 100 of us around around the open air place in a barracks, and marched us up, and each one of us, there was one of them that gave us a vaccination. Well, there's vaccination on the left arm, but they give us a shot on the right arm, and they said you have to have 3 shots when you first go in the Navy. Yeah. So I was back about 2 or 3 from the start of the line, and I got my shot. But since I understood you had to have 3, I thought, well, they may give them to us all at one time. So they kept saying, step up, step up. Finally, I stepped up, passed, got a second shot right there. And when I got to the next place for the vaccination, the fellow said, well, hell, you've been vaccinated already. He said, what are you up to? I said, well, they just told me to step up and didn't tell me to get out of the line. But at any rate, the man ahead of me, as I told you, I only weighed about 115 pounds. He must have weighed 160 or 70 anyway. Big, husky man. And when they gave him a shot, he went down like somebody hit him in the head with an axe. And then they lined us up, and I remember one thing they said was, whoever was in charge said, we need a head gang. And who will volunteer for a head gang? Well, of course, a head gang sounded good to me, so I stepped up ahead. See, well, I found out later all I did was clean toilets for a whole week. See, I was a head gang, and I didn't know I didn't know what toilets were called. I didn't when I was set up the side. But I thought I was getting in the head gang, and I cleaned toilets the whole week. Also, I spent, was that World War I or II? Let's see. Yeah, that was World War I. In what they called the world's largest bedroom. It was a Quonset hut about, I'd say a block and a half long, and in maybe a block wide. And they had some 3,000 beds in there. And I know they gave us a lot of chocolate pudding one evening, and I think it must have had a physic in it, because during the night there was 6 heads that you could get into, and there was 9 stools in each head. And yet during the night I was up half a dozen times, and every time there was long lines waiting at the door to get into the toilets. And I'm satisfied what happened is they give us a shot of physic of some kind in our food. But that was a wild idea, I tell you. But as I say, then they transferred me over to the signal school. And the minute I stepped in that signal school, I thought, I don't belong here because the lights flashed. I thought, I never will. That's not for me. But at any rate, of course, I had no choice. So in less than 6 weeks, I had it down to they made me an instructor. There I stayed. And I guess I could read that like a top, just like a top. But at first I thought, my gosh, I don't belong here at all.
Did they ever put you on any ships in the Great Lakes?
No. I'm a cornfield sailor. They had some little training on the board vessels on the Lake Michigan there, but as I say, I was in the signal school and I never was put on one of them.
Let's see. Now there's a bridge named for you here.
Huh?
There's a bridge named for you here.
This viaduct over here runs from here right out to here second to Broadway over there is named for me. That's the one that I showed you there. And I've had a lot of this one here, for instance. 1973, that was given to me in Jefferson City, by the way, at Legion convention, distinguished Legionnaire, and then now below here was given to me in 1981 by the Sonoma Club here in Joplin. Called me. I was in St. Louis at the time. They called me back down here to take it, to accept it. And the one with the guild around it, that's the 4 chaplains. I'm an honorary member. I got that in St. Louis also, given to me, and none of that Service to Mankind award there. The only thing I ever did with that outfit, I never belonged to them or anything. They asked me to come out and make a talk one evening. I made a talk one evening. A year later, well, they gave me this thing. So I've been very, very lucky.
So you got lots of awards.
Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord. I tell you, and I've had, they say variety is the spice of life. And I've had it, I tell you.
What else have you done?
Oh, in 1920, I drove a covered wagon pulled by a team of horses with a bunch of horses behind, trading horses from Greenville, Texas to Joplin. About 4 weeks doing it, and I was attempting to trade horses. I got into Joplin and didn't have but one horse that would pull the wagon at all hardly, like it wouldn't hardly pull at all. Anything. So I lost my shirt trying to trade horses. But in 1933, I broke a team of animals to work and drove an ox team pulling a covered wagon 1,200 miles. My daughter was 5 years old at the time. I had her 6th birthday while we was on the trip. We lived in a wagon, camped to the side of the road at night, drove down the middle of the road during the day. And I went from here to Springfield on 66 Highway, which was a highway in those days. And then 65 to Sedalia, and then 50 across through Jeff City, by the way, and on over to St. Louis. And then I went all over in Illinois and finally wound up over in Illinois. My wife's mother took sick, and as I told you, she was a nurse, so her mother wanted her back, so we come back, and I went back later to got my team in the wagon and things. But altogether, 1,200 miles I covered with an ox team and person in a wagon. I've got pictures of that somewhere here too, by the way. And then after I came back here, I broke out 4 more ox teams. I took the animals as they were and broke about to work, made my own yokes for them, and built my wagon. I don't mean the running gears, but the wagon itself. Otherwise, I built that, and put them in parades and celebrations and so forth, to show you the difference. I went into St. Louis. I don't know how well you're familiar with St. Louis or not, but anyway, the Chain of Rocks Bridge is north of St. Louis. Yeah. Well, I went to St. Louis and I stayed there for maybe a week, I guess, and then I took out, and I was worried to death I was going to get across the Mississippi River, and went to the Chain of Rocks Bridge, and they had overwork banister on each side of the bridge, and I pulled up there just about a block from the toll gate, and I went up to and I asked the man at the toll gate, I said, "What's it going to cost me to cross the river here at this bridge?" And he, of course, got out and looked back, and I was about a half a block away from him. He said, "Well, what the hell is that?" I said, "Well, I'll go down and look at it." So he did. He went down and looked at it. He said, "What did you charge me to put a sign on there?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I've got a tire cover here that says shortest way to Memphis by way of Chain of Rocks Bridge." He said, "What did it cost me if you let me put that sign on your wagon?" I said, "What are you going to charge me to go across?" He said, "Nothing. I'm going to let you go across. You just go ahead and go across." But I said, "Oh, give me a $5 bill." So he gave me a $5 bill and tacked the sign on the wagon, shortest way to Memphis. And I carried that and got $5 a month for it later on. I'd send him a card and he sent me another $5 bill. But the last time I used it, I spent 10 days up here in Springfield in the Empire District Fair, Empire Fair up there. And I spent 10 days there and got $2,000 for it, $200 a day. And the last day that I had a team, I had a yoke of steers that had 51 inches from the tip of one horn to the other, longhorns. And I got them on the 24th day of of January, whatever year that was, I forgot now. At any rate, then I had them on a pasture out here, and the fellow on the ground where I had them pasture said, "How long are you going to take to break them?" I said, "In 6 weeks I'll have them working, or 6 months I'll have them working." He said, "You can't do it partially." Well, 5 months later, I had them out in front of, representing a beer company here at the 4th of July celebration. Actually, it was on the 3rd day of July. But I had them up there and got $350 for a day. That's different. $5 a day. I was getting back $5 a month is one thing to see.
Now, where did you learn how to do that?
Huh?
Where did you learn how to train the oxen?
Well, I just learned by trying. Of course, I talked to a lot of older people that had maybe had something to do with them, but the first thing you do is breaking the team of oxen. First thing you do is tie both of them to the same post or tree or something out in the yard and tie their tails together. That way they become partners, see, and they have to lay down or anything else while they both of them have to do it together. And I found that out, and so that's the way I started training all of them. And as I say, 5 months after I got this team 1 year old, I bought them at 1 year of age, yearlings, and 5 months later I had them working and got $350 for a day. I am now retired from the post office, by the way. And the 6th day of June, I was retired 30 days. 30 years, man, 30 years. 6th day of June, I was retired 30 years. So I've been very lucky from that angle. I've had an annuity and Social Security, and my income is very nice.
Yeah, that's good.
It costs, between you and I, it cost me $276 a month for this. Air conditioning, heat, everything except my telephone is the only thing I paid for. And of course I can't drive anymore. Of course I can't see well enough to know whether I'm missing the fellow that's coming toward me or not. I sit here and I read without my glasses. Really? Read paper and all that. But I'm just not capable of driving, and I know it. Yeah, I never had a wreck. I just quit about 3 years ago, and that's. But I'm glad I did, because I know that I use good sense. As I say, approaching the age I am now, I'm lucky to be well off as I am, and I know that.
Why do you think you've attained this age?
Huh?
What do you attribute your long life to?
Well, my father died when he was 59, and my mother died when she was 55, so I can't attribute any of that. I had a step-great-grandfather, and of course that's no blood relation, but he lived to be 103. And he was a lawyer, and went down in his office till he was 103 years old. Died when he was about 103 and 6 months of age. But that didn't have anything to do with me, quite naturally. I think some of the same, of course I volunteered in both cases, in the Navy and also in the Army. I was a volunteer in both cases. And I think some of the same sort of feeling has contributed also to my ability and my willingness to devote myself to my hometown here, you know, because I've been very well thought of. I can't commence to believe how lucky I've been. But even today, quite occasionally, I get a call from somebody that wants, you know, some ideas of what I ought to do or one thing or other. But I think, as I've told you, I think up here is where it is, honestly. I can't, no, I can get out and walk. Fact matters, I walked 10 blocks to church yesterday evening, up to the Catholic church. I'm Catholic, and I walked 10 blocks. I took my time of doing it, of course, and even sat down and rested a time or two. But I did walk that, and you probably noticed that I have a scooter over there, a battery-operated scooter, and I take that and go around where I want to go. You know, I don't use it often, but I do use it occasionally. It's a lot less trouble than it is to. I mean, I don't get as tired doing that as I do a walking course. Yeah. 10 blocks walking. I started about 45 minutes ahead of the time, and it took me practically the whole 45 minutes to make the 10 blocks. So, but that's good for my age. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, you know, I don't feel bad about it at all. And this brother of mine, I told you, 93 years old, and I'm in better shape than he is. So.
How old did you?
Huh?
How old did your mother and father live to be?
My mother lived to be 55. My father, 59.
Oh.
So it didn't come from them. Yep. I don't know how. I can't understand. Of course, I'll tell you one thing. I have been well, I don't say I hate doctors. I don't really hate doctors. I think they have a place in the scheme of things. Yeah. But I never go to a doctor except for an examination occasionally. And since George Burns fell in the bathtub and cracked his head, I don't get in the bathtub too much either. I try to use some, although the bathtub here, you got something to hang on to everywhere you go, see. But I think a part of what makes it I think that the Lord gives us a certain length of time to work out our salvation. And with a man like me, it takes a little longer, that's all. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I think.
Now, you told me you went to Jeff City and talked to the legislator.
Oh, yes. We had on the Connor Hotel, which was the hotel in those days, 6 stories high, we had what they call that now, but anyway, volunteers. It was all by volunteers, but the Army supervised it, and our job was to watch for planes, foreign planes, and to notify whoever was our superiors in case we saw any kind of foreign plane. Because in those days he was talking about Japan, particularly coming over. No, not in those days either. That was earlier than that. But anyway, when I was in Alaska, we were watching for Japan to bomb us. But anyway, we were up there on top of the Connor Hotel, and that was our job to observe all the planes that went over, regardless of what they were, and to try to recognize them and put them on the board, and also they'd be doing. And we were, I think there was only 2 such places in Missouri time. I think St. Louis had one, and we had one here. Mm-hmm. And I was a captain of one. They was 24-hour duty, of course. I served 8 hours, and there was 2 other captains. 3 of us were captains of the thing. So I went to Jeff City and made a plea. And by the way, somewhere I've got the speech that I made to the joint session. I insisted that if we were of any value down here, that they needed more of them around the state. And when I went in, somebody other, I don't know what I came about, but anyway, they convened both houses, and I spoke to both houses. And I can't think who the Hearns, I think, was the governor at that time. I believe Hearns was. I'm not certain I'm right, so maybe he was later.
He was in the 60s.
Well, no, that wasn't the time I'm talking about ahead of that.
Yeah. I don't know if it would have been Donnell or Donnelly or.
But at any rate, as I said, I don't have Alzheimer's, but I have Alzheimer's.
What about Thomas Hart Benton? Did you know him?
I never knew Thomas Hart Benton, but I think I had met him once or twice. He made the paintings in the City Hall here, mm-hmm. And I think at some time I must have met him, but I'm not certain that I did. And of course he did the painting of Jefferson City up there, Jeff City, up there. was looked down on very much because he showed the bare hinding of a baby up there, something that everybody was doing, of course, you know. But
Yeah.
but he was because he was born, I think, in Neosho or somewhere down there. But his first art training, he was inspired. He came to Joplin and he got a some sort of a job illustrating something for the newspaper here. Mm-hmm. By the way, the newspaper was 100 years old. It's about a week or so ago. But at any rate, he got a job there, and he was too young to go into a bar, but he sneaked in some way or other and got to see the picture of the naked woman back of the bar. Mm-hmm. And by the way, later on, one of the madams in one of the whorehouses here had that picture down in her home, and I saw it down in her home. The picture she had when the bar shut up, she got the picture of the woman, naked woman. I saw, but he came up here and got his first inspiration partly from that.
I wonder where the painting is now.
Huh?
I wonder where the picture is now.
I don't have any idea. She lived then at what they call well, it was First and Joplin Street. Joplin's first one west of here. Down there, she lived down there then, and was a very respectable old lady. Although she'd been a madam for years.
What was her name?
Lord, I don't remember. I know it very well, but I can't think of it right now. What are you trying to think of?
I'll come back to you later. What about Bonnie and Clyde?
Oh, I was a judge when Bonnie and Clyde were here.
Oh, you were?
And yeah, they rented a place out here at 34th and Oak Ridge, which was out south here, 34th Street, this 2nd Street, and then 34th Street, and then over 2 blocks west. They rented a house there, and I had a well, the Parker Undertaking Company here was a man named Steve Parker, was a very, very fine friend of mine, and his brother was what they call a neighborhood policeman at that area out there where they was, and he collected $5 a month from them for a couple of months off of Bonnie and Clyde to watch the place for them. Of course, he didn't know who they were, but when they went out of there, they went out shooting, and took out toward Neosho, and they killed. And I was talking to a man I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, whose father was killed when Bonnie and Clyde killed him as they went out that morning. He was a deputy sheriff or something of the kind for Newton County, and they killed him right there. I know there was one person killed. I never had any contact with them in any way, but although I was in a position where they might have had, but I didn't have any contact with them. But later on, I think maybe it was Florida where they were ambushed. I'm not sure now. Well, no, Texas was. So I don't know. Anyway, they were ambushed them, and got them, and they deserved that. I mean, Bonnie and Clyde, they were a rough pair, sort of thing. But this friend of mine who was, as I say, policeman in that territory, and he got so much a month from each house, you know, for doing the police duty. he collected from them for a couple of years. A couple of months. I'd known who they were even. But I don't remember what it was that caused them to all once tear out, but they did. They come out of the garage. The garage was underneath the house, and they come out, and as they came out, they were shooting. And,
why don't you tell us about your hat?
Huh?
Why don't you tell us about your hat?
Well, I have here the first one. There is the World War I medal they gave us when it discharged us, and this indicates the Signal Corps, which I was part, and then here's World War II, and here's a commander of the American Legion, and World War II's released from Edmond and Alberta, from Connecticut or Maryland, and this is I got this presented to me by the ROTC at Joplin High School, 75 years, 75th anniversary World War I. That's one here. Then I've been a life member for a number of years of the Legion Post. And of course, this is the World War I deal, and this is my Navy insignia. And I've been a member ever since 1920.
What about the Depression here?
Depression years? Well, the Depression years, I was in the oil business, Skelly distributor here in Joplin. And an uncle of mine and myself were partners, and we had 5 trucks operating, selling kerosene to the farmers. In those days, the farmers drove their tractors with kerosene. That was before they ever had any of this other stuff. And we had these 5 things. And we got down to the place where I couldn't clear $5 a week for myself after I paid the help. And that's when I broke out my first team of Oxford to work. You couldn't buy a job.
Yeah.
You just wasn't. And I just had already gone broke in business, so they changed. And I owed everybody that didn't know me. And those days, it was a disgrace to take bankruptcy. It isn't anymore, but it was in those days. So I didn't know enough to take bankruptcy. I just finally paid them all off and got clear of it. But that's when I broke my first team, ox team, out and went to made them. That's what you throw 100 miles. And I left Joplin with $2.78 in my pocket. I remember it very well. Of course, you could buy a loaf of bread for a nickel or a quart of milk for a nickel in those days too. But I came back with all my little bills, like my insurance and my utilities that I'd passed up and all paying. Came back with them all paid and little dab money in my pocket after like 2 days, had been 6 months when I came back after a 1,200-mile trip. Sure. And then, as I say, that became a hobby with me, and I broke out a number of other teams. However, we're in southern Illinois, though, and no, that was Springfield, Missouri, where I went. Colonial bread people paid me $5 a day to carry a sign on the side of a wagon. $5 a day. As I told you, I got $350 for a day afterwards. But that's part of the variety.
You remember seeing your first airplane?
Huh?
You remember the first airplane that you saw?
The first thing what?
First airplane that you saw? Airplane?
Oh. No, I remember the first motion picture I ever saw.
Oh yeah? Tell me about that.
Where we're here now, where the Mercantile Bank is, 6-story building on 4th and Main, that was a vacant lot in those days. By the way, they had a pair of Germans here who had a frame building there. I mean, this wood frame building, and run a saloon in it. And they left here and went on a trip, and they went down with Lusitania when it went down, and that became a vacant lot there. And later on, then one time, some outfit with a motion picture outfit came to town, and the building next to that was not known as well, I don't know, but anyway, it was a brick building. So they showed the picture on the brick building up here, and the people were all standing around watching it, of course, and when they saw the train coming down toward them, they all jumped back out of the way. I remember that very well. That was my first motion picture to ever see.
You remember what the movie was about?
I don't remember what it was about, but they had a train coming right toward us, you know, and everybody dodged the train, got out of the way so the train could come on through.
Oh, I see. The train was on the screen.
On the picture. That was a motion picture. but they all dodged. And then later on, when there was, we had an eclipse. And in those days, Connor Hotel was the only place that they had anything, such thing as bellhops. But they had some bellhops, and one of the bellhops grabbed me a bunch of old brown whiskey bottles from there, and come over and broke them up and sold them at so much a piece for people to watch the eclipse from that vacant lot right where he worked. That's where he operated. I thought he was one of the smartest men I ever saw. Man, he right now he got down to business. See. But I don't remember. I remember the eclipse was on, but I don't remember what year it was or anything. Okay. But he now the same building. That's a 6-story building there now, full of attorneys one day and another.
Yeah.
No doctors anymore downtown. They're all out around the edge of town, close to the hospitals.
Let's see, what have we not covered? You got anything you'd like to add here?
Well, how I happened to go to work for the post office, by the way, and I could have been the postmaster here if I had just went at it, because Harry Truman named the postmaster here, and I knew him personally, and I just finished in 1940, along with him, I just finished making a congressional candidate campaign. So I was the most natural thing. The fact of the matter is, a man that was postmaster at that time called me down in February. He said, about June, I'm going to retire. He said, you go after this job, Vern. He said, you're a natural, you know Truman very personally and one thing and another. Well, I happened to be sold in the advertising novelties at that time, and I was doing pretty good at it. I said, oh, Truman can't be elected again to save his life. He did. He made it past everybody. Really, nobody thought he could be elected, but he made it anyway. And I said, when the next one comes in, I'd get kicked out anyway, so why do it? In those days, the postmaster was a political job, you know, no question about it. So they appointed a man that stayed in there 19 years, and he was still postmaster. My wife said to me, though, we were in Pierce City, Missouri. I had a place out in Pierce City where I had a lot of my advertising stuff, one thing or another.
Let me hand you something.
Well, wait a minute. There, you see, right down there. Down there.
Here?
That, yeah.
There.
Well, you see those big heads on there? On this truck. My brother, second brother, not the one that was in the World War II, but my second brother was an artist, and he made these big heads. All of them made them, just made them by taking clay and laying down on the floor, and putting stuff over it, and they were waterproof and everything else. And we put those in. This is, well, you might read a little bit of it, but we put those in parades, and one thing and another all the time, see.
Huh.
And he had so much talent, so he finally wound up playing an organ in nightclubs all over the United States. And he played in an orchestra at least 15 years before he ever took a music lesson of any kind. He played by ear.
Oh.
And never saw an instrument that he couldn't play. In 5 minutes from the time he picked a new instrument up, he could play it. But I have no musical ability that way at all.
What was your wife's name?
Mary Ellen Ward was her maiden name. Mary, she died the 17th day of June, 6 years ago, and put up with me 65 years. We had our 65th anniversary before she died. And by the way, when I was judge, I married a great number of people. And very recently, I was invited to the 60th anniversary of a couple that I married in 1936, and went out there. And they, by the way, are still together, and they have 6 grown sons, no daughters, just 6 grown sons, all of them married. But I was at their 50th anniversary, and then I went to their 60th anniversary, and I told them, I said, now, you, when your 70th one comes along, you better have one along about 5 years from now, because I'll be 105 years old when your 70th one comes along. And the lady said, well, we'll send you an invitation. But I married 2,478 women. That, not a bigamist. That many men too. That was the days when men and women married each other, not like they're trying to do nowadays. But I averaged, in 6.5 years, I averaged right close to one wedding a day. And of course, it was the job. As a judge, my entire income was dependent on fees. In other words, I had no income otherwise, and so I married people at all times, at various times, and had some. If there was some unusual thing like somebody getting married in an airplane or something, I was the fellow they called on. I married a couple in a lion's den with 3 live lions one time out here at a nightclub. And when they come to the office, I married them for $5. I got $15 on it out of the nightclub. But they had 3 live lions. They put them in a cage. And there was 2 females facing each other, and right behind where I stood was a male. And about the time I got, well, commenced with, my wife was with me, and she said, "You're not going in that cage." I said, "Yeah, we'll see about that." Anyway, when I come up there, the trainer said, "Now, Judge, you don't have to go in the cage if you don't want." I said, "If they're going in the cage, I'm going in the cage," which I did. And it was my back to the line, to the male lion. About the time I was ready to pronounce the man and wife, he let out a roar. Of course, I jumped. Somebody asked me when I come back, I said, "Judge, what'd you jump for?" I said, "Well, I heard him honk his horn. I thought he was going to run over me." But I figured that they sure wouldn't let me go in there if there was any danger to it, really. And I went in and married. As I say, I got $15 for that. It was big money in those days, you know, compared to what I get. Of course, blacks and whites didn't marry. You couldn't marry a black and a white then in those days at all here. There was a few states they did do it. Illinois did, by the way. But now they just, I had a couple come before me one evening, one Saturday night, and the man was, he looked like a big Indian chief from Oklahoma. And they come to my house, and they said they wanted to get married. Well, I could smell liquor on her breath. I said, "Nothing doing." I said, I can't marry you in the condition you're in. And she said, "Now listen, Judge, we've been going together 3 years. We've had a drink or two, that's right. But we know what we're doing. Now you do anything you want to do, but we're going to bed together tonight." I said, "Stand up here." They come back 6 months later to show me they were still together. Come to my house to let me know that they were still together. What I did was all right.
Now you were in the Last Man's Club too, with the bottle of champagne.
Huh?
You were in the Last Man's Club with
Last Man's Club of last living man of the Last Man's Club of World War I. Yeah.
Was that here in Joplin? Or?
Yeah. Oh yes. All of us were members of the American Legion, and 100. We limited it to 100. Now, as I said, I'm a member also of World War II, but it's cut down now that there's only about 35, 40 people there, so I've got a good chance of beating them even. You never know. You just don't know what, and it's a good thing we don't know. I had an auctioneer friend of mine who was one of these kind that every time I ever went to one of his auctions, he always introduced me to the crowd as his friend and all this, that, and other. And a while back, he had an auction on Thursday, and Sunday afternoon he was killed by a train hit outfit that he's in, and killed him. And he was 25 years younger than me.
Yeah. So
you never know, see.
Yeah.
I may not be here tomorrow, but I may be here to 110 too. By the way, just three, let's see, this is 303 and apartment 309, which is along this same side here. We've got a woman who celebrated her 100th birthday, 22nd day of March. And we had a big party for her, and I sang, "You Must Have Been a Beautiful Baby," to her. But now I'm the second, she's the oldest, of course, in the apartments here, and I'm the second oldest.
I wonder if she did anything in World War One.
Huh?
She'd remember World War One when she.
That's only just as I told you, I was instructor at the signal school, Great Lakes Training Station.
Yeah. Now, can you think of anything else you'd like to add before we end the interview?
Huh?
Can you think of anything else you'd like to say before we end the interview?
Well, no, I kind of like to stress the idea that I think that our wars practically always have been for the underdog, and that practically always we have been, as I said, helping the Lord triumph out of the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. I think that that we, in spite of all that we've done and all the crookedness we have, and today, I don't feel as free to walk down the street, a white-haired old man, as I did a few years ago, because now a certain group of teenagers, mostly teenagers, will rob or beat an old man up just for the purpose of, even for a dollar bill. They'll do it these days. So I'm not as free to walk like I used to be. Now, back years ago, there was an 87-year-old man that you'd see him out maybe way over in the south part of town in the morning, and in the afternoon you might see him over in East Town walking. He walked all the time, 87 years old.
Uh-oh. The light blew up.
Yeah.
Did you keep on talking?
Was that yours?
Yeah. Yeah, you keep talking there. It burned up, I think.
Oh, by the way, in my various civic activities, of course, I've been on TV, not regularly, but maybe 8 or 10 times at local places here. And I had a woman that used to interview me. She was taller than I was, but she always made me stand on a step. She made a step, made me stand on that so I'd be as tall as she was when she was interviewing me. She's one has a regular, what they call a show once every day at noon. She's on this particular.
Yeah.
I don't know of anything that's worthwhile. I wish I did, but my experience with Harry Truman, of course, is good, and and my experience with a Brigadier General Kramer suitcase was good too, of course. But I have a place here that really I don't know. I don't think I've earned all of it, but I have been very, very lucky, and it turned out just right. I'm very proud of that poor chaplain's affair there, because it was given to me in St. Louis, and well, read what it says across the bottom of it if you.
Yeah, here about as tied up as you are.
The poor chaplains that went down on the ship, after giving up their life jackets in the North Atlantic.
There you go.
It says, Fort Chaplains Legion of Honor membership, presented to Albert Vernon Sigars by the Chapel of Fort Chaplains, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in recognition of service to all people, regardless of race or faith. This membership symbolizes for all Americans and for all time the unity of this nation, founded upon the fatherhood of one God. And it's signed, of course, by the head of our organization. But I'm very proud of that, because I think maybe that I had a black man and a white woman before me one time when I was a judge, and the police had arrested him for what they call cohabitation in the bus station. He was in charge of the baggage there, and they brought him up in front of me, and I gave the woman, when they brought her in front of me, I gave her 6 months in jail. And then they brought the black man in front of me, and he stood there just shivering and shaking, because he naturally he thought maybe I'd sentence him to be hung, I guess, or something, you know.
Yeah.
And at any rate, I gave him 6 months. And right then and there, within the next 30 days, I had a string of black people come into my office and talk to me, and I couldn't figure a little bit what. Finally, one of them told me, he said, the reason we're all for you now is because you treat the blacks just like you do the whites. And I said, you said you give that woman just as much as you give the old so-and-so, what his name was. But what it says there about for all American, for all time, the unity of this nation, founded upon the fatherhood of one God. I'm satisfied that's true, and I'm very proud of that. It was given to me, as I was saying, in St. Louis.
Yeah.
At the old Jefferson Hotel. You know where Jefferson Hotel, 12th and Locust, I think it was.
Yeah. I'll hang it up for you in a minute. Well, I think that about covered, I guess.
I guess.
Okay.
I'm sorry I couldn't say. You know, the poet that wrote Trees, I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. That same man was killed in World War I as a sergeant in France. A sniper shot him through the head as he was trying to get his group of men out of a foxhole. But he wrote that poem to show you that all sorts of people make up our armies. But 1 month before he was killed, he wrote another poem, and I don't know whether I could recite it in some poem, but anyway, it says, let's see. Well, I can't think of the story now, but anyway, he wrote another poem. In the wood they call a rue bouquet, there is a new made grave today. A grave not dug with spade nor pick, but covered with earth 10 meters thick. In this grave lie many fighting men, dead in their youthful prime, never to laugh nor love again, nor taste the summertime. For death came flying through the air and stopped his flight at the dugouts there, touched his prey and left him there, clay to clay. Now, he was 33 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But that was written just 1 month before he's killed.
And what was his name? This book here?
Yeah, I might find it real quickly. I know it, but thinking of it all at once. He wrote Trees, and next title, let's see. Kilmer. Joyce Kilmer.
Oh, okay.
Joyce Kilmer. But he was a very kind man, and he wrote that Trees after the request of a woman who asked him to write a poem about a tree. And the last of it says, poems were made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And I think that was a wonderful thought that he had, and yet he was the kind of a man that went into the army and was killed. One of the tragedies of war. And others, damn fools like me, just go on living. I could have been ordered to go out and been cannon fodder in either one of the wars. Could have been. I volunteered, in other words, and that could have been, but it's just lucky as I am, that's all. And I attribute it all to luck. When I retired from the post office, I don't remember now what I was making, but I know I went to work at 65 cents an hour, but I was making more than that time I retired, of course. but they immediately, they was looking for somebody to put SSI, as they call it, Social Security Income Extra. And I had 10 counties around here, and they gave me $1,000 a month and a secretary that they paid her $600, and then give me an office in the Red Cross office in long desk in the Red Cross office. And I put in 6 months of that, and was making almost twice as much money as I was at the post office, and retired, see. In 1966, I was. So I tell you, those luck plays are sad.
Yeah. Yeah, this has
But
been
I
very
don't know.
good.
I don't think of anything else. So I wish I could.
It's been a very interesting interview. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I'll get it shut down there.